Okay, everybody, I'm going to get started. I hope that everybody can hear me and see the screen I'm sharing. If you would go ahead and click the chat button if you have any questions. Laura's going to monitor that as we go through, and I'll try to answer all of your questions. And obviously, you can call or email if you have questions after that. And then if you can't hear me, you can't hear me now, but Laura has put directions in the chat box on how to call in using your phone, and you can also call in using your computer. So we're going to talk about the Capacity and Growth Index, or the CGI, which is our new Special Education Monitoring and Oversight tool. This is going to replace the former Comprehensive Program Review, or the CPR. All right, so we kind of did a little comparison. There are many similarities between the CPR and the CGI, and then there are some big differences also. The CPR had 25 items. They were all related to paperwork compliance, and then some of them were just no longer applicable. We had things on there like you will only use the forms in Enrich, and that isn't really applicable anymore because we don't have any PDF forms. And then the ratings on the CPR were a 0, 1, or 2. The CGI takes those 25 items, or what was left of them, and condensed them into 11 items that are related to paperwork compliance. And then there are 11 items that are related to student and program growth. The ratings now match the SPF, so there are 3 ratings. You can get a 0, 1, 2, or 3. And then there are tiered support levels that also match your SPF. So we tied together what would be in good standing, caution, and breach. In the CGI, it explains the different levels for Tier 1, or what used to be Tier 1 is good standing, the kind of support that you'll get, and the kind of tasks that you'll have to complete. And then the score that you have to get. The score for a Tier 1 would be 100%, oops, I switched the screen, 100% on the last CPR. So if you got a 2 at the end of this year, you are in a Tier 1, or the core performance framework equivalent of a good standing. Your school will then have to complete a checklist for each item on the CGI quarterly. You won't necessarily have to turn in evidence for those, but you'll have to acknowledge that you're continuing to maintain evidence. You'll have to submit signed policies and procedures, and you'll have 2 files, complete files, reviewed and enriched. So we'll look at the student from beginning to end and enrich and make sure that you're maintaining your status. A Tier 2, or the CPF equivalent of caution, is a returning school, or a school that has recently removed a corrective action plan, a school with a corrective action plan with maintenance items, a returning school with new coordinator, or a district coordinator transferred depending on the previous school standing. Your previous CPR score would have been a 90 to 99. So that, I think, puts you in the range between a 1.9 and a 2. And for that level, you'll complete a checklist for each item quarterly. You'll submit signed policies and procedures, have 2 files reviewed and enriched quarterly, participate in monthly technical assistance calls with Laura or I, and maintain your corrective actions per your corrective action plan if that's applicable to you. The third tier is the SPF equivalent of breach for returning schools. If your school is a returning school with a corrective action plan and or a new school, new coordinator, and your previous CPR score is an 89% or below, then your school will need to complete the entire CGI, which has dates that are spread throughout the school year, participate in weekly technical assistance calls, maintain corrective actions per your corrective action plan. Next week at our special ed coordinator face-to-face training, we'll make sure that each of you know where your school stands and the requirements that you'll have for the following year. So what I'd like to do at this point is talk about why our change was needed. And we talked a little bit about this last fall if you were with us. If you weren't, we had that 25-item CPR, and that was really great at measuring our paperwork compliance, but we needed something that matched our strategic goal of increased student outcomes. while still monitoring paperwork compliance, because we know that that's really important, especially with an upcoming audit. So we developed this tool to match those strategic goals and make sure that we're shifting our focus, not necessarily away from paperwork compliance, but including student outcomes as well. So I'm going to switch my screen here, and I'm going to show you the old CPR so you can see what that looks like. And that's this document here. The beginning is all the mumbo jumbo about, you know, who's participating, when you're going to do it, and how. And that's all pretty much the same aside from the support levels. Here's the ratings for 2, 1, and 0. And then here's where you get to say a little bit about your program. And here's where your coordinators would turn in their evidence. They would explain their evidence, and then I would come back, or Laura would come back and explain their rating and why that rating was that way. So this form has 25 items on it, all about service logs, accommodation logs, were IEPs done on time, comparable services, reevaluations, everything's on there through item 25. And then I will show you the CGI. So the beginning of the CGI all looks pretty much the same. It talks about our requirements as an LEA and your requirements as a school, why we do this. It's going to occur during the fall semester and throughout the year, and we'll give you those due dates next week. The people that participate in it are you, anybody at your school that would be involved in this. We can also involve our boss, the Chief of Access and Equity, who right now is Audrey Lane, the Director of Federal Programs, Mr. B, and then the School Special Ed Coordinator, and anybody else like Power School that might need to help give information for this. These are the ratings that we just went through. So there's your Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3, and each part of the CGI that you'll have to participate in depending on your tier. And then these are the ratings. So instead of a 0, 1, or 2, now we've got 0 through 3. So a 0 would be potential corrective action plan. There was a denial of faith involved and multiple compliance errors on that item. So you would get a 0. A 1 would be no evidence of any degree of implementation. So you might have a system in place, but you're not using it. A 2 would be a partial plan in place to meet legal requirements, but you're not meeting all legal requirements. And then a 3 would be the plan is 100% in place and meets legal requirements. So that is what you're aiming for, a 3 on everything. So here is where the capacity piece starts. First item is on the capacity index has to do with policies and procedures. This is something that everybody turns in at the beginning of the school year. We have 2 due dates for this. The focus group that we held said, you know, it's great to have it at the beginning of the year, but it would be even better if we could just turn it into you in June for the following year. We'll make any changes we need so that we don't have to work on it over summer. So if you're a returning school, you can turn it in June, or you can wait till August. It's up to you. The second item is school files are kept confidential, locked up to date, accessible, organized with appropriate information, stored for the required length of time. And again, that will be June for returning schools. If they'd like to show us, they still have that for the next year, or August. The third item is all of your IDEA required information is translated if it needs to be. And then we'll double check that by looking in Power School and making sure that Power School doesn't indicate any parent is limited English proficient. And if you do have parents that are marked as LEP, we'll have to ask for evidence of translation services. The fourth item is 100% of special education and related services staff are in place and highly qualified and appropriately certified. So that's where you're going to turn in all of your related service personnel's licensure, and we'll make sure that they meet the criteria. Fifth, all school staff and contracted service providers have participated in pertinent special education and RTI professional development. So make sure that you're keeping your PowerPoints and all your documentation sign-in sheets for the professional development that you do. Sixth all IEPs are compliant. So this is one that has changed a lot. Instead of just looking at IEP compliance by itself, we are going to do basically an entire file audit. So we're going to look at, not only are we just going to look at the IEP, we're going to, in this item, look at accommodations. We're going to look at service logs. We're going to look at progress monitoring, timelines, documentation and enrich being finalized, all of those things in this item, instead of looking at it in let's see, I think 7 or 8 different items. The next one is dealing with comparable services and transfer students. So those, we combined our 30-day and our 5-day. So those are going to be one item now. 8, all reevaluations. So that's going to include your reevals and your initials. And we're going to make sure that, you know, everything is right with those. They were conducted by a multidisciplinary team, and they have evidence of previous RTI procedures. 9, you have a system in place for managing your databases. That's including PowerSchool. We look at our EFA codes, and then enrich, making sure everything's accurate in there. 10 is discipline, and we combined all of the discipline items from the old CPR into number 10. And 11 is timeliness and accuracy of reporting for the district, state, and federal requirements by end of year CPR based on a year-long data collection. So Laura and I, when we ask you for information, are keeping track of when we asked for it by, when you turned it in, was it complete, was it accurate, and your rating is going to come from that. So you need to make sure that you're really paying attention to turning in complete files, turning them in on time, and what we asked for. I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions so far? If you have questions, go ahead and type them in the chat box. You can find the chat box at the top right. All right, no questions so far. Not sure if that's good or bad, but we'll, oh, there's a couple. Hold on. I think they're coming through to me. Give me 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can answer them.
Tell me to share everybody.
Just for future, when you share a question, make sure you share it for everybody so that we can see it. So the first question is from Susan. Is there a helpline for any questions that we have? So that's Laura and I. You're a new transfer school to our district, so you'll find out a lot more on Monday. But any questions you have, just call us, and we have weekly meetings set up with you as well that you'll be able to ask those questions in. And then for Kathy, what's required specifically for PD about SPED to general ed teachers? So that's where you're going to talk about RTI, FERPA, FAPE, all the things they need to know to be able to make sure they're following the law and, you know, implementing IEPs and all of that in the classroom. As far as documentation for that, in the past we've asked for, if you guys do a slideshow, you can give us your PowerPoint and then sign-in sheets or agendas, whatever you keep to show that you did that. Any other questions? We have a small group. Okay, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And then the next thing I wanted to show you guys was our menu of support. Oh, sorry, I'm skipping ahead. Okay, so for the second part of the CGI, so we looked at the capacity part. Now this is the growth part, the G. So this is brand new. And so you may have a lot of questions. That's okay. We'll try to answer them as best we can. This piece is where we're going to be looking at your program and how your students are progressing through your program as a whole. The 2017-2018 school year will be your baseline year. So that's where we're going to fill in your current measurement. And then from there, we're going to look at a trend. Are you increasing? Are you decreasing? And based on that information, that's where hopefully you'll take that and really look at your program and see what changes you might need to make sure that all of your students are succeeding. So I think there's 11, if I'm not wrong, items on this. So I'll read through those. The percent of the population that has are students with disabilities. So what percent of students are students with disabilities as identified under IDEA? And that is something that we'll pull from Enrich. And we want to know how close is the school to meeting state norms. So the state norm's 13%. Where is your school compared to that? If it's way above or way below, we'll just ask you to look at why you think that might be. For discipline, we're going to look at our students with disabilities disproportionately disciplined as compared to their peers without disabilities. So again, we're going to look at students with disabilities and their discipline record. We're going to start a conversation and compare you to the baseline for the state. So if you're way above or way below, we're going to ask, why is that and what can we do to change it? For COSEF, we're going to look at your COSEF data. So that's the Child Outcome Summary Form. So our early childhood students with disabilities meeting expected growth targets before age 6. So we're going to say how many students were rated higher at exit than at entry, because they should be for their COSEF data. And then I have the state targets for each of those broken down here, and we'll talk about how close you are to those. Student promotion. So this is how many kids or are students with disabilities progressing in the general curriculum as measured by promotion to the next grade. So we're going to look at your retention rate. How many kids with disabilities are being retained each year, held back in their grades. And then, if it's something that's continuing to increase or you're just way out of the norm, we're going to talk about why that is. And that will come from PowerSchool. Achievement test, so this is where we're going to look at your student achievement, compare it to our general achievement, and then are they meeting the state cutoff level. So this example is SC ready, but we have high schools that take many other tests, and the littles take a lot of other tests too. And again, Laura just reminded me, this data will be from the previous school year because the state doesn't report out until later on. So this will all be historical data. We're going to look at credit accumulation for the high schoolers, so that's also going to come from PowerSchool. Are the students with disabilities accumulating enough credits in order to graduate on time? And this, if there's any people with high schoolers in here, this is going to be for students in attendance for at least 1 year, not to include students on non-diploma track, so that's not going to count against you. Also, if you have a student move in spring, we're not going to look at that student because that would be there to hold you accountable for that. Student achievement graduation rate. Really quick, Kathy just asked the question, will we be able to give all teachers access to Enrich? We can do read-only. You just have to, I'll send you the link for the form to fill out, and you can have read-only access. Let's see, sure. Graduation rate. Our students with disabilities graduating with a regular high school diploma. And so we're going to look at the same cohort the state looks at, the 9th grade cohort for 4.5 years instead of the 5-year. And that will include a cohort of students, again, that are only in attendance for at least a year. For student achievement student goals, we're going to look at our students' IEP goals. Are your goals rigorous enough, and then are they progressing and meeting them? So we're going to look at progress reports and make sure that they're meeting their IEP goals, which I would assume most of them are. Student attrition, are students with disabilities leaving the school at a higher rate than non-disabled students? Obviously, we would have concern if your students with disabilities are leaving at a really high rate from your school, and that would trigger a discussion. And then the referral rate. So we also want to look at, are you referring students for special education at a higher rate than average? So we'll look at that rate and have a discussion if it's too high or too low. And then the last question is using a school-selected nationally normed benchmark assessment. I believe all of your charters require that. the school's special education population is increasing their achievement year to year. So we heard from our focus group that, yeah, they know that the achievement tests are important and that data is important, but they also feel like you guys have measures at your school that can show your student growth from year to year. So we just want to know, we want to see that data and see, are they growing or are they not? And that is the growth index. So I'm going to switch back over, and if anybody has questions about the growth index, go ahead and type those in the chat box, and I'll answer those questions before moving on. All right, it looks like we don't have questions, but feel free to type away as I finish up here. So the next thing that I wanted to show you was, there we go, our menu of support. So this is where, you know, you have different requirements for the tiers that you're in based on your last CPR, but you'll also have different levels of support for those tiers. So we're kind of, you know, implementing an RTI model for our schools. So for Tier 1, if you're in good standing, you're going to have our triannual face-to-face meetings, and we're going to talk about, you know, the policies, procedures, laws, best practices. We'll have monthly webinars this year. They'll be recorded, so if, you know, you can't make it, you can watch a recorded one, but it's always better to attend live if you need to ask questions. You'll have a checklist for each capacity and growth index item quarterly, so you're going to just check off that you're doing those things, not necessarily showing us evidence. You're going to review the signed policies and procedures. You're going to review we're going to review 2 files and enrich annually. Twice a year, we're going to have a check-in call just to make sure that everything's going great. You'll have situational advice as always. So if you need to call, you know, something's blowing up, just give us a call just like you do now. And then parent support communication is needed. So we have parent calls. We'll take those and deal with them as they come. For Tier 2, that's your caution level, and that is your CGI score or your CPR score of 90 to 99%. You'll have your triannual face-to-face, monthly webinars, complete checklist, reviewed signed policies and procedures, review of 2 files. Here you'll have a monthly technical assistance call with Laura or I, and then you'll have situational advice and support, parent support, communication, and then you'll maintain your corrective actions for your corrective action plan if applicable, and you might have on-site visits. That just depends. I'm going to pause for a minute, and I see a question. Do we have dates for the on-site visit from SCD? We are going to, they will be going on-site to schools. They have not told us what schools yet. We won't know until right before. We don't have our dates yet. We are going to a training in 2 weeks at Research to Practice, and I think they are going to give us our dates then, hopefully. So hopefully we can plan out this year and know when that's going to be. But they will be visiting schools. Oh, let me share again. Okay. And then Tier 3, that's your breach, and that's 89% and below. So you'll have your triannual face-to-face monthly webinars. You'll complete the entire capacity and growth index with dates throughout the year, weekly technical assistance calls, situational advice, parent support, maintain your corrective actions. You'll have 2 on-site visits per year in the fall and spring. One of those will be announced and one will be unannounced. And then a specific targeted professional development as developed by the district, school admin, and special ed coordinator, webinar, face-to-face, depending on your need. So those are the different levels of support you'll get based on where you fall in the CPR. Keep in mind that this is fluid. So if you're in a Tier 3, that doesn't mean you can't ever get to a Tier 2 or a Tier 1. You're just going to have to go through those hoops and get your stuff fixed so that we can bring you to a Tier 1. Yeah, new schools and new coordinators will automatically start on Tier 3 because we've got to make sure that you guys have everything down pat before we let you go to a Tier 1. It's not a punishment. It's just we've got to make sure that everything's great. And again, that's not a breach status for the new schools and coordinators. That you're just in Tier 3. Let's see. The last thing I wanted to show you is our flow chart of support. So this is just a visual of that information. It shows our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And it just says all of the tiers will participate in our triennial face-to-face, our monthly webinars, and our district, just any of our district professional developments that will talk about policy and procedures, best practices, laws, and any other updates. That's just a visual. I'm also going to send these out in an email when I send the link for the recording so that you'll have all of this. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I will give you guys a couple minutes for questions. Otherwise, we will wrap up. I think I have talked about everything that we need to. So go ahead and type questions if you have any in the chat box, and I will stay on for a few minutes to answer, and then I'll stop recording. It should take a couple minutes to save the show, and then we'll post it. And yeah, Kathy, I'll see you tomorrow. I will email everybody the recording and the documents, yes. All right, everybody, I'm going to get off now. I'm going to stop recording. Have a great day, and some of you I might see tomorrow at our operators meeting. The rest of you I will see next week. Thanks.